The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
Hi everyone, it is Mark Kelly here, Chief Customer Officer and co-founder of Alldus. I hope everyone is doing really well today. I am delighted to welcome Callie Alexander to our podcast today. Callie is Customer Advocate at GlideFast. Callie, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast today.
Oh, I'm delighted and excited to be here, Mark. Thank you for having me.
So Callie, tell us a little bit about you and your journey into the world of ServiceNow.
Interesting journey. So I am what one would consider to be a midlife career pivoter. I spent a lot of my time in education. I've taught everything from first grade, fourth grade, trigonometry even. I've taught yoga. Even my first job was my very first job when I was a preteen was as a tutor. As a 10-year-old or 11-year-old or so, I used to teach or tutor young elementary students. I later went on to teach yoga and teach teachers how to teach yoga and led international yoga retreats. As a mother of 3 young children, as a single mother of 3 young children, I always wanted to be the type of mother that was available to her children as like the soccer mom, the karate mom, the dance mom. Really wanted to be available to my children in the same way that my mom was available to me. And I found that teaching was the way to be able to do that. My children can go to the same school that I taught at, and it worked out pretty well for a time. Then I transitioned into teaching yoga so that way I could be able to be a little bit more available because they were all going to different schools. And as my youngest child started to get later into her high school years, I said, okay, I know that I'm going to career transition into tech, but I didn't quite know in what lane, in what capacity. I just know that that would be the avenue for me. Later on, a really great mentor was going through a ServiceNow implementation, and she said, hey, I know that you're looking to career transition, and knowing how your brain works, I think ServiceNow will be the path for you. And at that time, ServiceNow was offering free training for their ServiceNow Administrative Fundamentals course, and they were also offering a free voucher to take the system administrative certification upon successful completion of the course. I dived in, both feet, and there was no turning back. I spent hours. I would set myself up on a schedule to study from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. while the house was still quiet. And then I would study again at the end of the night, another additional 2 hours. And I just studied and studied and studied. And eventually things started to make sense. And I really started to love the platform and all the functionality. And I was looking for a way to get in front of employers because I knew that I could do the self-paced learning through the wonderful Now Learning portal that ServiceNow provides, but I couldn't figure out how to get in front of employers. So that's when I started to start a LinkedIn journey where I started showing my learnings through live stream video directly on LinkedIn to hopefully catch an employer's attention. And so that's how my journey began. And I ended up getting a great job at GlideFast Consulting, Elite ServiceNow Partner of the Year, 2 years in a row. And I couldn't be happier.
Great story, and I loved how intentional you were about as your kids were growing older, you were able to position the type of parent you wanted to be and actually add the most value there as well. And then how conscious and intentful you were in terms of moving into the tech industry and thinking outside of the box and the diligence then. So obviously your why was so ingrained that it just made sense to be able to put this into practice with the studying that you did and showing that it can be done, right? And it's obviously very, very difficult and challenging to do that, but here you are now as well. So for people that don't necessarily know much about Knowledge. We were at Knowledge 23. We didn't see each other at there, but we were at Knowledge quite recently. Tell me about your experience of it. How did you find meeting different people, going to the keynote where Bill was? What was your takeaways?
Listen, I say this and I truly mean it. Knowledge 23, my first Knowledge conference, it was absolutely electrifying. From the moment that I stepped into the Venetian Hotel, there was a buzz. It was almost like as I was approaching the Venetian Hotel, you could tell that it was just slightly off the foundation. You could tell that there was something really amazing that was taking place inside. And again, like I did with my learning, I just dived right in. Two things that I wanted to accomplish at Knowledge, and one of them was to see the keynote address by ServiceNow CEO and chairman of the board, Bill McDermott. And the second one was to meet people, to get some face-to-face time with folks who I had either communicated online with or I had heard of, and to meet new folks. But to tell you a little bit about the keynote address, one of the things I was really happy about was hearing how Bill McDermott doubled down on his commitment to rise up. And that's the bold ambition to skill up 1 million people on the ServiceNow platform by the end of 2024. Now, we've heard of Rise Up before in the ecosystem, but to really hear him take that stage and say, look, this is not just some lip service, but this is what we're going to do, and this is why it's important. One of the things that he pointed out about that initiative, which I think is really important for us to underscore here, is that he also talked about how the partnership he later announced with NVIDIA, but how generative AI in particular is going to allow for the creation of more jobs, more interesting jobs within the ServiceNow ecosystem, and how that's going to allow for the creation of these super applications. So I'm really curious and really enthusiastic to see what these super applications will look like with the partnership with NVIDIA, with the use of generative AI. In a later address or in a later interview he did it with Jensen Huang, I believe his name is. He is the CEO of NVIDIA. And they did that interview right on the Knowledge 23 event floor. They talked about how generative AI is the present and the future for ServiceNow. So that was really exciting to be there for that grand announcement. We have these little pivot points within history, right? And I think that generative AI, not only is it top of mind, tip of tongue for folks, but this is an inflection point that's going to be really important for how we navigate our world. So I'm excited that ServiceNow is at the forefront of that.
Yeah, what's really interesting is you look at like OpenAI and how they've been able to use ChatGPT, is they've now given an interface for people to utilize this technology that was there already, but now people can come up with different case studies and actually bring those case studies to market through different types of plugins. And one of the ones that I saw was on Starbucks in terms of how in that live demo by the COO was looking at creating code there and then, creating a new feature, saving between 60 to 90 minutes while that code was just being generated. And then you also had the Starbucks employee being able to liaise in a variety of different ways where they could summarize some of the issues from a customer complaint into one small paragraph, making it easier then to respond in real time. Or when the person wanted to collect their coffee at one hotel, but actually pivoted to say, actually, I'm changing plans, I want to collect in a different hotel, how they could start to use all these different types of services and really having a problem worth solving being applied. And because, maybe argumentatively before you could look at AI being used for problems that didn't necessarily need to be solved, but now these case studies within business are allowing people to be more successful. And I'm truly inspired to see what's going to come down the track and where's this value going to be had. From speaking even to the guys at Microsoft, they were talking about the co-pilot they have with PowerPoint, where you're going to sit down now and you're going to go, write me a presentation or prepare me a presentation on this topic or provide me inspiration ideas on this topic, and then it will create this presentation. and show you ideas are possible, the art of the possible. So it is a particularly exciting point. So me, like you, didn't attend any sessions per se, but we were kind of going around on the floor, interacting and meeting people at the stands, engaging, seeing what the community was like. What type of insights did you take from that?
Yeah, I got a chance to meet a ton of people. There was that electrifying energy that I mentioned at the beginning of our talk was embedded within that event floor. I got a chance to not just talk to my colleagues that I work with at GlideFast and get some face-to-face time with them, but I got a chance to even see and talk to my mentors, people like Rob Fedoric. I got a chance to talk to Chuck Tomasi and his wife, Donna Tomasi. I got a chance to spend some really great time with GlideFast CEO Mike Lombardo and talk a lot about like what's next for GlideFast, which I was really excited about. GlideFast was also hosting GlideFest, which is our all hands on deck event simultaneously in Las Vegas. So that was very exciting to be able to be a part of both of those events, both Knowledge as well as GlideFest. But in terms of some of the takeaways, I want to just kind of point out here is that similar to what we're talking about here is that everybody is very interested in what is next and what this means for ServiceNow and generative AI. You mentioned about how with the Starbucks situation where they could take a particular customer concern or a customer complaint and then kind of create a one line or a one sentence synopsis. We're in a time where we're talking about those kind of a fantasy times and bringing them to actuality where you're like, oh, if you dream it, you can achieve it. But no, this is not just some type of an idiom or some type of platitude, but we're talking about actually taking things that we can imagine and actually giving them feet where they can grow legs and actually walk and make it a huge impact on where businesses land in this present day moment. And so that's what was a lot of the conversations that I was having on that event floor was like, wow, this generative AI is something else. And also there was still talk as well about Rise Up, because if you notice throughout the event floor, you saw these huge posters of people like Corey Wesley, you saw Ebony Akabala and some of the other faces of the Rise Up program. What I find exciting about that is that you saw a diversity of people, you saw a range of different people, and you saw that, hey, if they can do this, then I can do this as well. That I feel like I'm empowered to also build my career and to really, leave my footprint within the ServiceNow ecosystem. So those were some of the conversations that I was having. And I'm actually glad, at least for this first go around at Knowledge, that I spent the time actually having those conversations on the event floor. Many of the workshops that I wanted to attend, as they quickly fill up. I did not know that I needed to have a game plan in registering for the workshops. I did not know that, as soon as that workshop schedule is available, that I need to right away complete the form. But I'm glad that it worked out the way that it did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how you kind of mention those insights. So there were something that were very, very important to me and what I took away as well. If I added just one more to that, I think it was also that when you're interacting and engaging with people, they were so happy just to share their experience of using the platform, about how they'd benefited from it, how they'd been able to kind of take away some kind of monotonous work and then be able to do more higher value work and feel like they're kind of channeling their creativity. That was really nice to see and listen to in terms of how people are looking to succeed, but also the optimism around the platform about what the future held, about how their careers could go. And I feel that you mentioned people like Wesley, and how they're used, it's a really nice platform, really nice opportunity to show role models and how they actually got into their position and telling their authentic story. And I think, their stories were also authentic, that people could kind of gravitate towards that and kind of see, depending on where, who you are and your background, anything is possible. It's just trying to have the mindset that, if you want to do this, you can, but here's a few different ways that you can go about it. But everyone's story is different. From my perspective, I think knowledge hit the mark in terms of the content, the way to meet different people and allow people to actually share stories. But it was just really, really nice to see a lot of people in the room who wanted to come up with creative solutions to the challenges that they were having from a business perspective. But what was very interesting to see was at the start of the conference, they talked about ServiceNow.org from the not-for-profits and how you could drive that success and how important that was. And I found that particularly interesting. And you had a gentleman, I think it was ND Netherlands, who I met later on in the conference, who was going blind, and he keynoted at the start to share his experience about how excited he wanted to get his message across and meet everybody while he could still see. So there was so many little things that were put into place that I thought it was a very thoughtful conference.
I like what you said about ServiceNow.org. I thank you for bringing that up. I was really inspired by the stories that were shared by the president of ServiceNow.org, whose name slips my mind. I believe her first name is Vanessa, however. But I just wanted to shout her out because it was some really inspiring work that she was talking about during her talk, talking about how these nonprofit organizations and agencies are empowered by the power of ServiceNow. So it was really great to hear those stories. You also mentioned about the optimism on the floor. And I thought this was really cool. You probably will remember this as well. Throughout the event floor, you would see in these big, bold-faced letters the word yes in these bright green letters throughout the event floor. So optimism is definitely a word that kind of floated throughout the entire event space and a number of levels, either whether it was just actually having the word yes on the event floor or in those conversations about people's journeys, about people's business challenges, about how people are not just having these challenges, but how they're using ServiceNow to overcome their business challenges. So, and you're very right on the money when you talk about how ServiceNow Knowledge 23 hit the mark on that level.
And where do you see my final question? Where do you see the platform evolving to? Where do you kind of, if you future gaze and look at it?
Wow, that's a really great question. When I look into the future, where do I see ServiceNow? You know what I really believe? I believe that ServiceNow is going to be something that we're going to see early on in young people's lives in terms of career paths. So for example, we see folks that are going through college and then they eventually come to ServiceNow. But I think that the way that ServiceNow is growing so rapidly, I think that we'll start to find that you'll find high schoolers talking about ServiceNow as a career path at that stage in their lives and building upon that early on. So it's not something that they later come to because maybe a career counselor or maybe a program that is for post-senior year, postgraduate work. I think people start to come to ServiceNow at an earlier stage in their lives.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something in that. Kelly, Alexander, thank you very much for joining us on our podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.